As everyone knows, there was a bloodbath in all of the asset classes and markets on Monday in the United States. This was ostensibly triggered by a horrific jobs report that we had on Friday, August 2nd. The economy supposedly added only 114,000 jobs in July. And of course, take this with a grain of salt because these are government numbers. This was significantly below the expectations of economists. This was accompanied by an increase in the unemployment rate, which rose to 4.3% from June's 4.1%. Compounding that was another bloodbath in Japan. Japan's market crashed due to their own set of economic woes, as well as bad corporate earnings, global market pressures, and a fear that Japan's central bank is going to tighten its notoriously loose monetary policy. Many stocks in the United States on Monday were down hugely. Nvidia was down 8%, Amazon was down 5%, some stocks were down up to 20%. Coincidentally and strangely, a lot of platforms that the common man uses to invest, like E-Trade and Robinhood, had glitches throughout the day so that people couldn't get out of these crashing markets. It has rebounded on Tuesday. Many assets are up. The dollar's up to its pre-Monday highs. And so they're calling it Rebound Tuesday. A lot of hedge funds have bought the dip. So joining us to navigate this maze of complexity is a man who's been through many market downturns. Indeed, he's called many of them. It's the maverick investor, pundit, author, Mr. Jim Rogers. Jim, thank you for once again joining us at this virtual table.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. It sounds terrible, doesn't it?
It does sound terrible. So
I should hang up now. I should hang up now.
That's right. Or as my father says, should we all slit our wrists now? Probably not.
Yes.
But so what happened on Monday, Jim, from your experience? Is this the harbinger of the vaunted coming recession, or was this just a glitch, and are we going to recover and we have to wait a little bit more time before the worst of this comes?
Well, Xavier, we're here to ask you. You know the answers to all of these questions. I will tell you that, I mean, I don't have to tell you, you know that the American market's been going up for the longest in recorded history since 2009. This has never happened this long before. So time-wise, we're overdue. We're starting to see some of the signs that happened at the end of bull markets. You know, lots of new investors, few concentrated stocks going up all the time. I mean, these things have happened before. And what we saw this week is probably the beginning. I mean, when I say the beginning of the end, I don't mean it's going to end today. I don't mean it's going to end this week. I'm just saying it's one of those signs, those things that happens at the end, near the end, to be clear. So sure, we're getting closer to the end. But yes, maybe we have to be. This has been going on forever, 2009. You know, some of the people watching this show were barely born in 2009. So, you know, it's been a very long time, the longest in American history. So, and every stock, not nearly every stock market in the world has been making new highs. So when everybody's having a good time, it's usually time to start worrying.
Yep, it's way overdue. Also, I don't know if you know the SAM indicator, which has predicted all of the recessions over the longest time, is also calling that or saying that there's going to be a recession coming very soon.
Well, I don't have to have an indicator. I can just read the paper. You know, I would watch the internet. I know it's coming. It always, well, let's put it this way. It always has. Maybe it's different this time. You know, the Secretary of the Treasury in Washington says, don't worry, we've solved all the problems. Well, I know that's not correct, so be worried.
So can you explain a little bit to us what's going on in Japan? It seems like they're saying that just a fear of tightening monetary policy is sending their economy into free fall. What are some of the factors that are contributing to that? And is that what's ultimately going to pull the rest of the world down?
Well, the Japanese market was down for 35 years. That's not a typo. 35 years. Since 2090. What was it? Yeah.
1994.
1990. See, it's been so long, I can't even count it. It's been a very, very long period of time for a variety of reasons. In the last few months, it started going up. Not only did it start going up, it made new all-time highs. The Japanese were giving all sorts of incentives to invest. They were printing money. They were buying shares themselves. So everything was booming. I mean, you cannot believe the Japanese market has more than doubled, more than quadrupled in the last few years. So suddenly, somebody said, wait a minute, how long can this last? It's been going up for several years, and it's been booming. And somebody, in the meantime, of course, Japan has serious problems. The population has been declining for 15 years. The debt has been skyrocketing every month for years. So they got serious problems down the road. And unless something happens, there won't be a Japan in 50 years. So somebody suddenly said, wait a minute, how long is this going to last? And somebody started selling. But since there had been such a gigantic up move, when you start selling into something like that, who's going to buy? Not me. I sold my Japanese shares. I sold them too soon. I'm glad I did sell them too soon now. But no, it's going to be a serious problem in Japan. I repeat, the population's been declining for 15 years. The debt has been skyrocketing. It's got unbelievable debt. And there's no solution in sight that I can see. They don't like immigrants. They're not having babies. So who's going to save Japan? Not me. I can't afford to save Japan.
Begrudgingly, they're talking about accepting more immigrants now in Japan. So we'll see where that goes. It'll be a good case study.
Well, they did recently say they'd take a few thousand more. Few thousand. You know, a country with 125 million people. So they said, oh, yeah, we'll take another 375,000, some number like that. So that's not going to save Japan. The debt is skyrocketing. I mean, the debt situation is almost as bad as the US.
So we've seen a lot of tech and AI companies go down. And it's amazing how many predictions that you've had that have already come true from one of our previous interviews where you talked about AI. Now major pundits are talking about the fact that the AI revolution, while it's going to happen eventually, it's not ready yet. And a lot of these investments in AI were premature. They don't even have the infrastructure to set that into motion. So do you see more of a correction in AI and tech stocks coming down the pipeline in the next few months?
This has all happened before. During the railroad boom, you couldn't believe how high railroad stocks got. Some railroad stocks have never gotten that high since, and that was a few hundred years ago, a few decades ago. Electricity, during the electricity boom, you couldn't believe how high. When radio boomed, I know you don't remember the radio boom, but RCA skyrocketed in the 1920s. You could not believe how excited people were about radio. Computers. I remember at the end of the 60s, there was a laundry on Long Island, which changed its name to something computer. The stock skyrocketed. It was still just a laundry, but it was booming. This has all happened before, and I hope we both live long enough to see it happen many times. Many more times, I hope. I just hope I don't get sucked in.
Let's hope not. But a lot of economic voices are talking about the fact that these corrections, of course, come with massive layoffs. And there have been layoffs announced. There are more layoffs that are going to be announced in the next few months. What do you see for the common American here in the next 5-6 months? And more importantly, what should we all be doing to prepare for the worst?
Well, the worst is going to be, it's got to be a bad recession. You know, we had a problem in 2008 because of too much debt. Davia, since 2009, the debt has skyrocketed everywhere, everywhere. Even China has a lot of debt now. So the next recession has got to be the worst in our lifetimes because The debt situation has never, ever been like this in history. I look at the American debt, our debt, and I try to add and subtract. I don't see any way that anybody can ever pay that debt. But everybody's ignoring it right now. Well, maybe not everybody. Maybe somebody on Monday said, wait, we have a lot of debt. Anyway, the point is there are gigantic problems developing in the world economy. And for a while, the central bank in Washington just printed a lot of money and everybody was happy. But somebody looked out the window and said, wait a minute, look at all that debt. What are we going to do? Look at all that money printing. What are we going to do? And let me say to you again, the next time we have a bear market, it has to be the worst in our lifetime because the debt is so unbelievably high. If you have a pencil and piece of paper, just try to figure it out. It cannot be solved. It cannot be solved except with gigantic money printing or default or something that's not good for us.
So where does it end if this is what's starting out? Does this end in like disintegration, or does this end in are people, how bad's it going to get? Are people going to be like starving on the streets, or is this going to be like an inconvenience like 2008?
But 2008 was more than an inconvenience for some people. A lot of people
Right,
went
sir.
bankrupt. I mean, rich guys like you didn't go bankrupt, but some people did go bankrupt. No, it's going to be terrible. You're going to see bankruptcies. Well, or you'll see what you'll probably see is a lot of money printing in Washington and other places, and the value of currencies will go down. Inflation will get worse, and bankruptcies. No, it's not going to be fun. Go back and read some economic history about the really bad times. They were not fun. A lot of people were suffering very badly.
So it was announced that Warren Buffett, dumped a lot of his Apple stock just days before this crash. What does Warren Buffett know? Because it seems like Warren Buffett is usually very optimistic on the economy. But what do you think Warren Buffett's thinking? What's his play?
I don't know. You can call Warren, but I do know, just having read some of the stuff he said, he sees what we were just talking about. The debt is skyrocketing. Most stocks are not going up. During the end of bull markets, you have fewer and fewer stocks going up and covering up the fact that there's a problem. And all of this has happened before, and it's happening again. Warren's even older than I am, and I know he's seen all this before. So I'm sure he's seeing the same things we're talking about.
So just in the next, I guess, quarter to 6 months, if you want to share with us, what's Jim Rogers doing with his money? How are you hedging against this, or indeed setting yourself up to profit from these crashes that are coming?
Well, I have a lot of cash in US dollars, mainly US dollars. I have not started selling short yet. I'm not very good at timing. Obviously, I should have sold short on Thursday or Friday. I did not. I hope that I'm smart enough that when the rally comes, if the rally comes, that I'm smart enough to, at somewhere along the line, start selling short, because the next bear market is going to be a nightmare. And if you're good at selling short, you'll make a lot of money.
When you say a nightmare, like what percentages are we looking at here? We look at like 20% falls?
Come on, look at bear markets. Bear markets don't have 20% falls. Many stocks go down 80, 90% in serious bear markets. And some of the previous big winners go down 80, 90%. Some of them go bankrupt. Some survive. In 2000 or whatever it was, things like Microsoft went down huge amounts. Well, Microsoft's still here. It's still in business. But during the bear market, the stock went down an enormous percent. And that's what's going to happen again.
It's a correction. And you called very famously the mortgage crisis in 2008. So, Jim, the question is, when are my wife and I going to be able to afford a house? When are housing prices going to crash so that people can actually start buying houses again?
Soon. You're probably, I mean, I read that you're already starting to see in some parts of the world and some parts of the US, you're starting to see prices giving way. You know, people put their house on the market expecting lots of bids, and it don't happen. I mean, the early signs are starting to happen. But if you have the patience and can stay solvent for 2 or 3 more years, don't worry, there'll be lots of houses for you to buy.
Yes, that's good news for some and not so good news for some. So
Well,
I wanted, oh, go ahead.
You go.
It is. But I wanted to ask you this also. I don't know if you know about this, but for a few years, a lot of billionaires and people like BlackRock have been buying up things like farmland, single family apartments and houses, like en masse. What's behind this? Do you know anything about this? Why are they doing this? What are they
Well,
setting up?
well, I can see what's happening in agriculture and in farmland around the world. So some smart people are saying, wait a minute, why don't we buy this farmland? The numbers of farmers are declining. So obviously we're going to have an agricultural bull market or crisis or something. And if you own farmland, you're going to be very, very rich. But a problem is going to be who's going to farm the farmland. The average age of farmers in Japan is 68. In America, it's 58. You know, the world's running out of farmers. I don't know who's going to be farming. I'm not going to be farming. I'm not smart enough. I
Are you
think
all
I'd
right?
last long in the hot sun. But
Sure.
the world is the numbers of farmers in most of the world are declining, and we're going to have a serious problem again in the foreseeable future.
Do you
I
think the
can read,
robots are going
well,
to be
I
able
don't
to
know.
catch up with them?
I don't know any robots that are smart enough to farm, but I'm sure we'll have some. I'm sure there'll be some out there, but that's not going to solve our problem, not in time. Yes, maybe someday, maybe in 50 years, we'll all be eating with robots. We'll go to have a free lunch with a robot. But that's going to take a while, even if it starts happening next week, and it already has started in a tiny way. This is going to take a very long time.
And with some of these destructions that have happened over the last few years in food packaging plants and so on, I don't know if you've heard about this. Do you think that somebody somewhere has an interest in actually making the supply of food more scarce?
Well, obviously somebody has an interest because somebody wants to make a lot of money. And if you can produce food when other people need food, you'll make money. Is there a conspiracy? I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know. But there's always somebody who wants to take advantage of a crisis. It's been going on for millions of years. In Asia, in fact, there's a word. It's the same word. It's in same word in Chinese, Korean, Japanese, same symbol. That Asia, that crisis and opportunity are the same thing.
Yes.
And if you think about it, I mean, it's pretty simple. We don't have a word for that in English. Maybe we haven't been around as long as the Chinese, but it's obviously accurate. When
I
there's a
heard you
crisis,
say that before COVID, and I always use it now.
hooray. Well, if you can find the opportunity, send me an email.
For sure, we will. So, shifting gears just a little bit here. In our first interview, you said this. You said that the front runner in this time, and I believe that was about 5, 6 months ago, is never the front runner in the election towards the election time. And now, of course, as you know, the tables have shifted drastically. About 5 weeks ago, it was a shoe in for Trump. We all knew that Trump was going to win because Biden was there. But now that Kamala Harris is now the candidate for the Democrat Party, there are some polls now showing her in the lead. So how did you know that this was going to happen? Because you said, and you also said that something might happen to one of them. And of course, we know that unfortunately they attempted to assassinate Trump. How did you predict that? And more importantly, where do you see us going here in this coming election? Just generally.
More importantly, I make many mistakes. Don't worry. I may have told you about my first wife. What a mistake that was. Oh my God, what a mistake that was. So I make plenty of mistakes. But remember, this is not over yet. No matter how much the press thinks it's over, it never is. And Trump is older. I mean, Harris is not a young chicken, but she could do something wrong. She hasn't had enough exposure in the world. Who knows what else people may say about her or find out about her. I don't know who's going to win. I'm not going to vote for either one of them, I can tell you that, but it won't matter. I mean, I'll vote, but I'll vote a protest vote. I don't know who's going to win. I know it's not going to be good for America. It's not going to be good for us.
Neither of them.
So look at them. I mean, okay. If they were on this program, they would both say, he's crazy. I'll be great for America. Okay, hooray. Then you vote for that person. I'm not going to vote for either one of them.
Sure. And in that vein, if you want to share with us, what are your thoughts on Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? He probably doesn't have a chance to win, but would you favor his views over any of the other candidates?
Oh, I mean, you said he doesn't have a chance to win. I don't know that. I
don't know
know that I know that there are possibly going to be big surprises between now and early November. I'm not suggesting Mr. Kennedy is going to win. I'm just saying that neither candidate seems to have overwhelming popularity and approval. And often when things like that happen, people look around and say, well, who else? Who else is in the move? You know, we'll see. I don't know. I doubt that I'll vote for Mr. Kennedy, but who knows?
Sure. And so another amazing prediction you made, or not a prediction, but a statement that was very correct, when we talked about the Israel and Iran crisis in April, you said nothing's going to happen. They're going to come to the table again. And that happened while everyone else was saying we're going to World War III. Well, now we find ourselves in an arguably more dangerous position with, of course, Israel assassinating Ismail Haniyeh in Iran. And now Iran has promised revenge. Do you think that Iran is going to do another non-impact event and then everything will be back to normal? Do you think this time we actually do have a chance to escalate hostilities?
Well, we always have a chance to upgrade hostilities, especially with the people who are politicians around the world, all over the world. That's why we've often had, you know, we've had some really crazy wars in history, and in nearly every one of the wars, after a few months, people say, how did we get into this stupid war? And then they say, how do we get out? But the problem is there's no way out. And that's the problem we're finding now. We're not in a really deep, bad war right now. Well, I mean, maybe Ukraine is a serious war, but people try to figure out, how do we get out? And the problem is, because of egos and circumstances, it's hard to end a war until it's just devastation. If there's devastation, of course you can end a war. But no, I see all of the signs that have happened before earlier wars. If you look back at 1912, say, I mean, the British and German royal families were going on holiday together. They were marrying each other, all sorts of things. You know, 2 years later, they were in this unbelievably crazy war in the trenches that nobody could get out of. Eventually, after huge devastation, they got out of it. But that always happens, I'm afraid. And I look around, and they always start with small wars that people ignore. People say, oh, don't worry about that. That's insignificant. Unfortunately, historically, those insignificant things that people don't worry about lead to more and more problems. And I mean, I certainly see what's happening now, and I worry that this is going to escalate. I don't know where or how or why, but someplace that we're not thinking about right now often turns out to be a big problem.
It's often a black swan event, sort of.
Well, make a good point. In 2000, I mean, in 1912, nobody had ever heard of Sarajevo. The next thing you knew, we were killing each other all over the world because of something that happened in Sarajevo. It's always something that nobody thinks about. If we could anticipate, it wouldn't happen. We could prevent it. Well, you know, and even Sarajevo, the guy who shot the Archduke, was on the wrong road. He was at the wrong place. And all of a sudden, there was the Archduke and his wife broke down in front of him. He shot him because he was at the wrong place too. They were all at the wrong place at the wrong time. The next thing you know, we had World War I. Amazing.
So
tragic.
The new Iranian president, relatively new because the last one died in a helicopter crash, President Pezeshkian, is ostensibly a reformer. Do you think that he could have a hand in dialing down tensions this time? Or do you think it's all in the control of the supreme leader? And basically, in your analytical mind, what do you think Iran is going to do? Because they have not responded yet. What do you think they're going to do in the next few weeks?
I wish I knew. I could get rich. And you could get rich. We could all get rich. They don't know. The problem is they don't know. And in situations like this, the people themselves don't know. You know, they get torn away with emotions. They go to meetings. Somebody says X, somebody else says Y. Then somebody sends them a letter, blah, blah, blah. And the next thing you know, oh my God, how did this happen? No, but I don't know. I'm sure that somebody could figure it out, but even the people involved at this stage don't know what they're going to do and where it's going to lead. And I certainly don't.
You talked about in our last interview the oil price being an indicator, and in fact, oil futures are down now. So certainly the oil market doesn't think that anything immediate is going to happen.
You're talking about this week.
Yes.
I wish it were that easy. Oh my gosh, you mean all we have to do is watch oil for a few days and we know what's going to happen in the world? I didn't know that.
This is over.
Nobody ever told me that. I suspect that just looking at the world, there are going to be more problems in the Middle East, therefore with oil. And I don't know what. I mean, Russia has oil. Everybody, lots of people, big people have oil, and we all need oil. But I can see that there's more and more turmoil coming. And if there's more turmoil coming, it will be in oil and other things. You should be worried. I'm worried. You can do what you want, but I'm worried.
And do you see actual physical turmoil coming to the streets of the United States, especially given the tensions in the current coming election?
An astrophysicist? Is that what you said?
I'm sorry, actual physical turmoil. Do you see physical turmoil coming to the United States as well? Perhaps people fighting due to this coming election?
Well, of course, if there's turmoil in the world, some of it's going to wind up in the U.S. too, some parts of the U.S. So far, because of our physical location, we have been able to avoid the worst chaos in the world for a couple hundred years, but it's getting closer, unfortunately. I am not suggesting that people in New Jersey head for Nebraska, but I can see that we're going to have more problems. The world's getting smaller. There is the internet. Yes, of course, I can see the next time we have a war or physical problems. It's going to be more widespread than in the past because communications are better, everything. We will all know about it. And people can put a bomb in a suitcase now and do something. 100 years ago, that would have been very, very difficult. Now it's not so difficult.
So God
Don't go
forbid.
to Nebraska. You don't have to go to Nebraska yet.
Maybe Texas. So
The problem with Texas is it's very popular, it's very big, and it's got lots of money. So, I mean, I'm not suggesting that Texas is going to be a problem or immune. I'm just suggesting. Look at a map. There's a great story about a guy in 1938 who was in Paris, who realized the world was coming to an end. He got out his globe. He found himself a small island in the South Pacific, and he left. He left Paris to escape the disaster. The small island in the South Pacific he found was called Guadalcanal, which was the site of the longest and bloodiest battle in the Pacific. So he was a genius, and he destroyed himself. So be careful.
be careful. So thanks, Jim. And just so I have one random question for you. Who's the gentleman in back of you with the beard from the picture?
That's my great-grandfather.
Wow.
And he was living in the United States in the early 19th century. And for somehow or another, he had enough money to get himself a painting. And,
That's great.
there weren't many photographs in those days. So, and somehow or another, I wound up with it.
Where was he from originally?
Well, he originally was from Germany. Originally. As
Very
you may
interesting.
know, there was, after the English, the Anglo-Saxons came to the U.S., later there was a big wave of immigrants from Germany, other places too, where Germany was in trouble in much of the 19th century, before Bismarck and a few people changed things. And he was from a very successful family, but he was the black sheep. So he left and set out for America. Here I am,
In Singapore.
yes, in Singapore.
Another story.
So maybe I better get a painting of myself done too.
Sure, you should do that. Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining us. It's always fun. It's always very informative and interesting. And I hope you join us again.
My pleasure as always. I look forward to next time.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Be careful. Bye-bye.
Oh, yeah.
Bye-bye.
You too.